Could a society invent a punishment so terrifying that the pain itself became the show? In ancient Rome, cruelty wasn't just born from madness, it was often a deliberate, systematic, and chilling display, staged with eerie precision and theatrical intent. Fustuarium, beaten to death by your own brothers. Discipline in the Roman army was absolute. The legions stood as the foundation of the empire, and their precision and loyalty were essential to Rome's dominance. Any sign of weakness or failure to follow strict military codes was met with a terrifying punishment known as fustuarium. Fustuarium was not a punishment handed down lightly. It was reserved for those who deserted their posts, showed cowardice on the battlefield, or broke the sacred rules of Roman military conduct. But what made this punishment so horrifying was not just its violence, it was who carried it out. It wasn't the commanders or officers who enforced it. The punishment was delivered by the condemned soldier's own comrades, the very men who had marched, camped, and fought beside him. With heavy wooden rods or clubs in hand, these soldiers would beat their fellow legionary to death. The assault was brutal, the blows relentless, and the act performed in full view of the entire unit. The violence was not hidden. It was part of the lesson. This served a dual purpose. It stood as a public warning to others tempted by disobedience, and it reinforced the unbreakable code of loyalty within the ranks. But fustuarium was more than a physical death. It was a death of honor. To be struck down, not by enemies, but by brothers in arms, was one of the most degrading fates a soldier could suffer. In a culture that prized unity and bravery, such an end marked the ultimate disgrace. The Roman army was built on brotherhood, and turning that bond into a weapon was a psychological strike as much as a physical one. The fear of fustuarium ran deep. It didn't just stop desertion. It controlled hearts and minds through terror. One act of failure could lead to a humiliating, public, and agonizing death. And in that, Rome showed just how far it would go to preserve control, loyalty, and the terrifying order that made its military one of the most feared in history. Radish torture, pain with a purpose. Among the most grotesque and least known punishments of ancient Rome was a method so disturbing it blurred the line between pain and humiliation. Radish torture. Believed to have been practiced during the reign of Emperor Nero, this brutal form of corporal punishment was inflicted on slaves, criminals, and anyone who dared to offend Rome's strict moral or social codes. The method was as cruel as it was symbolic. A radish, or a similarly shaped vegetable, was forcibly inserted into the victim's body, often through the rectum or vagina. The natural shape of the radish, sharp and coarse, caused severe internal injury, making the pain not only unbearable but drawn out over time. The object was often left in place, extending the agony and maximizing the physical torment. But this punishment wasn't just about bodily harm. It was designed to break the victim from the inside out, emotionally, mentally, and socially. The violation of one's body in such a degrading way served a darker purpose: total humiliation. It was a calculated assault on both dignity and spirit, a message that Roman authority didn't just own your life, it owned your body and your shame. Radish torture was often reserved for those accused of moral crimes like adultery, blasphemy, or sexual misconduct, offenses considered threats to the Roman ideals of honor and decorum. The punishment mirrored the nature of the crime in a perverse display of symbolic justice, turning the act of punishment itself into a spectacle of public dishonor. What made radish torture especially terrifying was its lingering effect. The physical pain was immense, but the psychological damage ran deeper. Victims were left scarred in more ways than one, forever marked by an experience designed to dehumanize and disgrace. Its true power lay not just in its cruelty, but in its message. Challenge Roman order, and the consequences would be as horrifying as they were unforgettable. Even those who only heard of the punishment were forced to reckon with the fear of stepping out of line and the lasting horror that might follow. Damnatio ad bestias, condemned to the beasts. In the heart of ancient Rome, there was a punishment so savage, so deeply theatrical, that it blurred the line between justice and entertainment. It was called damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts, and it stood as one of the empire's most terrifying methods of execution. This punishment wasn't reserved solely for criminals. Slaves, prisoners of war, political rebels, and anyone seen as a threat to Rome's authority could be sentenced to this gruesome fate. But more than a penalty, it was a calculated performance, a blood-soaked drama played out before roaring crowds. Inside the Colosseum or other massive arenas, the condemned were forced into the sand-filled battleground. Their opponents weren't other men, but starving, feral animals, lions, tigers, leopards, and bears, trained through hunger to be vicious and merciless. The victims, often barely armed or completely unarmed, had no realistic chance of survival. Their deaths weren't a possibility, they were an expectation. The moment the beasts were released, chaos erupted. The crowd watched as the wild creatures charged forward, mauling, tearing, and ripping their victims apart. Limbs flew, screams echoed. The sand turned red beneath bodies crushed and shredded. Every second fed the Roman appetite for violence and reinforced a brutal message. Defy Rome, and this could be your end. To the Roman state, these executions were more than punishment. They were theater with a purpose. Each violent spectacle sent a clear signal to the population. Obedience was mandatory, and rebellion would be crushed not only swiftly, but publicly and savagely. Fear was the goal, and the arena was its perfect stage. Even before the beasts touched them, the condemned were dehumanized. They were stripped of names, dignity, and rights. Their pain became public entertainment. Their death, a twisted celebration of imperial power. The more grotesque the spectacle, the more frenzied the cheers from the audience. Sometimes victims were mocked or forced to perform humiliating acts before the killing began. Others were shackled or weakened, ensuring the combat was nothing more than slaughter. The audience demanded suffering, and the empire delivered it without pause. Though often aimed at criminals, the net widened. Rebels, traitors, even innocents caught in political tides could be fed to the beasts. Their deaths became propaganda, living warnings of Rome's unforgiving rule. Even gladiators, trained to fight and survive, were occasionally thrown into beast combat. Not as punishment, but as entertainment. Yet even they often fell, their skill no match for the raw, wild force of nature. Damnatio ad Bestias was not merely a punishment, it was psychological warfare. Fear turned into blood sport, and one of Rome's most disturbing legacies of control through cruelty. The silent death, death by poison. In the ruthless world of the Roman Empire, not every execution was performed in the open, under the roar of the crowd or the spectacle of the arena. Some were carried out quietly, behind palace walls, over dinner tables, or in whispered betrayals. Among the elite, death by poison became one of the most chilling and effective methods of execution. Unlike the brutal public punishments designed to terrify the masses, poison was used in silence, hidden behind goblets of wine or platters of food. It left little to no trace, no gory aftermath, and no need for explanation. For emperors, senators, and those entangled in the web of Roman politics, it was the perfect tool for erasing threats without creating martyrs. This method was especially favored in the upper echelons of power. Political rivals, ambitious generals, and even family members could meet their end with a sip or a bite. No spectacle, no blood, just a slow, painful descent into death. Among the substances most often used were hemlock and cicuta, both deadly in small doses and nearly undetectable in the right hands. Hemlock, drawn from the plant Conium maculatum, attacked the nervous system. Victims would experience gradual paralysis, their muscles slowly freezing until breathing itself became impossible. Cicuta, or water hemlock, caused violent convulsions, respiratory failure, and eventual death, often leaving witnesses unsure whether the victim had died of illness or unseen hands. One of the most infamous cases of poison's deadly role in Roman history involves Emperor Claudius. It is widely believed he was poisoned by his wife, Agrippina the Younger, who sought to secure the throne for her son, Nero. If true, Claudius's death was not just an assassination, it was a strategic move in the deadly chess game of Roman succession. And he was far from alone. Rumors of poison swirl around many emperors, with whispers of betrayal echoing through palaces and corridors long after the victims had drawn their last breath. But poison wasn't reserved only for the powerful. It was also used against those accused of treason, corruption, or blasphemy, offenses deemed too delicate or dangerous for a public trial. A cup laced with poison could bring about a quiet end, avoiding scandal or revolt. Often, the poison was administered by those closest to the victim, trusted servants, food tasters, or even friends. Symptoms began subtly: nausea, pain, disorientation. Then came the collapse. In hemlock cases, paralysis crept slowly from the legs upward, eventually suffocating the victim as their lungs stopped responding. The horror was quiet, but unmistakably cruel. What made poison especially disturbing was its stealth. There were no crowds cheering or jeering, no swords, no flames, just the slow unraveling of life, orchestrated by someone who might smile at you across the table. It was the weapon of those who wanted blood, but none on their hands. In a world where power was everything, poison was more than a method of execution. It was a strategy, a calculated act of control, and in ancient Rome, where even dinner could be fatal, trust was often the deadliest gamble of all. Rome's punishments were brutal, but there's more where that came from. Subscribe for more dark history and don't miss what's next.